We can't experience reality directly. We only ever experience our own particular ways of experiencing things. So if we want to know what is real, we need to start with ourselves and our own minds and ask what it would even mean to have an experience. Well, that question takes us right back to this guy, Immanuel Kant. And today we not talk about why he thought we can't actually experience the world directly, and what that means for us trying to figure out what is real. Let's begin with what might seem like a random statement. The green color of the leaves is not in the leaves themselves. It's in me. If I were to chop down this tree, take this leaf and put it under a microscope and break it down into its smallest components, I would not find the color green, because the color green is not a property of any physical thing. Rather, the green color of the leaves is in me and my brain and the way that my brain processes light waves. But then what about this chair? Is the redness of this chair in the chair, or is it in me? Or how about this apple over here? Is the roundness of the apple in the apple, or is it in me? Well, the answer to both of those questions, according to Kant, is that the redness and the roundness are in the thing itself and not in our minds. Why is that? Well, because those properties, redness and roundness, are determined by the thing itself. The shape of the apple and the causal powers of the apple determine that it will bounce back certain wavelengths of light, which our eyes will interpret as red. But the color green is not a property of trees in the same way. Greenness is not determined by the tree itself. It is determined by our mind when it interprets the wavelengths bouncing off of the leaves as being green. So the greenness of leaves is in our mind, but the roundness of apples is in the apples. In order to understand this distinction, we have to first introduce two German words that are often translated into English as phenomena and noumena. The word phenomena refers to anything we can experience, so things like green leaves, round apples, and red chairs. Noumena, on the other hand, refers to things as they are in themselves, mind-independent, like maybe just stuff. Now this is a really weird idea, but bear with me. So the roundness of apples and the redness of chairs are properties of the apples and chairs themselves. Those are things that exist outside of our mind, and we happen to be able to perceive them. Those are examples of phenomena. Whereas the stuff that makes up the apple or the stuff that makes up the chair, the protons, neutrons, and electrons, that stuff doesn't have any colors at all. That stuff isn't round either. All those properties, redness, roundness, color, shape, etc., etc., they're all just ways that we interpret the world around us. They're phenomena, things we experience. But the stuff that causes those experiences, that's the noumenal world. That's the world as it is in itself. And if the phenomenal world is everything we can experience, then the noumenal world is everything that exists whether or not we're around to experience it. So when we look at this apple, we see a red, round object. That's the phenomenal world. But when we're not looking at the apple, is it still red? Well, no. Redness is a property of the apple as it appears to us. It's not a property of the apple in itself. So redness is not part of the noumenal world. In fact, none of the phenomenal world is part of the noumenal world. The phenomenal world is dependent on the noumenal world, but it's also entirely made up of our interpretations of the noumenal world. This is a super weird idea, and it took me a long time to wrap my head around it. So let me try to illustrate it one more time. Suppose I lived in a world where there were only black and white objects. Then when I looked at a zebra, I would see a black and white animal. That's the phenomenal world. But the noumenal world, the thing as it is in itself, would still be a colorful place. Even though I couldn't see any colors, there would still be red apples and green trees and blue skies. They would still be there, but I wouldn't be able to experience them. So the phenomenal world is a subset of the noumenal world, but it's a subset that is entirely defined by our ability to experience things. Now you may be thinking, why do we need this distinction? What's the point of talking about these two different worlds? Well, the reason we do this is because we want to explain how we know anything at all. Because if the phenomenal world is everything we can experience and the noumenal world is everything that exists, then the question becomes, how do we go from this over here to this over here? How do we go from things that exist to our experiences of those things? Well, the answer, according to Kant, is that we use our senses and our reason to impose our own organization onto the chaotic, meaningless flow of things. We impose our own categories, and then we say that that imposition is the actual world. So, for example, we see a tree, but the tree is actually just a bunch of xylem cells and phloem cells and bark cells. But we organize that mess of stuff into something called a tree, which is something that we can interact with and predict and categorize. We take a bunch of unrelated observations, and then we relate them to each other by putting them under a single concept. And then we say that that concept, that thing that we made up, is real. And this applies to everything we experience. There are no actual properties in the world like redness or roundness or color or shape or texture. These are all things that we impose on the world. But the properties that we impose on the world are reliable. They're reliable because they allow us to predict and interact with the world around us. So we can make useful statements like, hey, that apple over there is round and red. And we can rely on those statements being true, because our concepts are reliable ways of interacting with the world. So in short, Kant thinks that we don't experience the world directly. We only experience our own particular ways of experiencing things, our phenomenal world. So the question, what is real? Well, that's really just a question about what the relationship is between the things we experience and our minds. And that's really a question about how knowledge works. So if you want to learn more about how knowledge works, you should check out this playlist right over here. Thank you to my supporters for making these videos possible. You've got a noble heart, you've got a curious mind. You've watched every single video in my 12-volume philosophy series. You've learned more about philosophy than most people ever will in their whole lives. You know all my best jokes. You've heard all my greatest hits. And now you get to be the first to see the future of this channel, because I am taking a break from studying ancient philosophy to announce that the next video I am gonna work on is gonna be on utilitarianism. I was gonna wait until I finished all my videos on Stoicism, but I got so many requests for utilitarianism that I just couldn't wait. So if you want to see that video, and all my other videos early, sign up to be a supporter and get all kinds of cool perks like a private Discord server, blooper reels, behind-the-scenes posts, the power to request topics, and more. The link is in the description below. The distinction between phenomena and noumena is one of the most important and complex elements in Immanuel Kant's critique of pure reason. It lies at the heart of his transcendental idealism and represents his attempt to explain the limits of human knowledge while preserving the possibility of certainty within those limits. Phenomena are the world as we experience it, reality as it appears to us through the filter of our senses and the structures of our mind. When we see a tree, hear music, or feel the warmth of the sun, we are not accessing reality as it is in itself, but reality as it is shaped by our sensory faculties and mental categories, such as space, time, and causality. Kant argued that the human mind actively organizes sensory input according to these a priori forms, meaning that experience is always mediated. We never have access to raw reality. We only know reality as it appears to us. Noumena, on the other hand, refer to things in themselves, ding and sich, reality as it exists independently of human perception. The noumenal world is the ultimate, unfiltered nature of things, unaffected by the conditions of our experience. However, Kant insists that we can never directly know or perceive the noumenal world, because our understanding is limited to what our senses and cognitive structures can process. We can think about the noumenal as a concept, but we cannot describe or comprehend it in any empirical detail.